Welcome! I'm so glad you're here. I'm Gila Ross, parenting educator and coach, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Confident Parent podcast, bringing you the content you need to bring more ease, joy and love into your parenting so that you can show up as the parent you want to be to your children. All right, welcome everyone. We are super excited to have Chavie in the studio with us today. So Chavie is a mom from Montana. She lives in Montana with her 5 adopted kids, and I met her over Instagram. Our kids learn so much by learning to differentiate what actually happened and how that made them feel, right? Because
it's such an important distinction, and it also trains them to be detectives for themselves, right? And be more aware of like, wow, when someone says that to me, what do I feel in my body, right? Like, and we talk a lot about those physical experiences. Like, does it make you want to throw up? Does your stomach hurt? Do you, because I have kids like that who all of a sudden they feel sick, right. And they're nervous and they have anxiety. And so it's like, when someone says this to you, what do you feel in your body? And to be able to, and nobody's can do it all the time. Even as adults, that's something that I'm working on and still can't always figure out, right? But to have that language from an early on of how does that make you feel, and being able to differentiate between what someone said to you and how that makes you feel. And to circle back, about, what are tips about, talking about in your family, about conversations and, people being hurt or insulted things, that happens in every child's life. And I think it's a balance between giving your children the resilience and the ability not to be so easily offended, right? Like, plus having and knowing that they have someone to talk to about it, and knowing that they can work it through, and knowing that when to report. And I tell my kids also, not every time someone says whatever does you need to go to the teacher. Right. There is a difference between being able to just move, not be so easily offended by because you're kids and kids are kids, and and knowing when it's important to get an adult involved. And it's subtle, right? And obviously you want to err on the side of caution. You want your kids to tell an adult anytime they feel uncomfortable. But I do think there is a place to share resilience and share that there are people in this world who are unkind, and they're unkind probably because they're suffering, right? And people emote, and people's energies are how they feel inside. So if someone's being mean to you, it's usually because they feel yucky inside, right? And it's really not about you. And so sharing that, and also the age old, treat people how you want to be treated, right? And I tell that to it's cliche, but it is so true. It's like, how would you like to be treated in this moment? And that's how you treat your friend. And I tell my kids all the time, how sometimes someone says something to you and you feel really hurt by that, or you have very strong feelings about that. So on the flip side, when you talk to someone, be sensitive. You never know what's going on inside their life. We have this conversation all the time. You never know what's going on in their family. You never know if that kid didn't have breakfast this morning, or that kid came to school and their parents were fighting, or that kid didn't have somewhere to sleep at night, or that kid didn't feel safe, right? And usually you can trace it back. The kids who are, being mean or struggling is for a reason, right? It's not an excuse, but there's a reason why they're behaving that way. So I think it's just so much conversation and nuance, and it's not black and white. Nothing is black and white. If we can teach our children to think about things and see, well, why do you think that kid said that? Or why do you think that kid acted that way? Why do you think you feel that way when that was told to you? When do you need to get help from an adult? When is it important to get support? When is it, when do you need to figure this out by yourself, right? When do you need to speak up for yourself and not have an adult do it for you? If you're the kid that always gets the adult to fight your fights, you're not going to have the skills to be able to do it when you're younger. So sometimes my kids come home and they say, this person said this to me. And I'm like, well, you're going to go back. What are you going to say to them? Talk to them. Like, no, I'm not going to talk to them for you. Right. What are you going to say? Like, my kid came home saying one day that, with a bunch of her girlfriends, and, they touch her, or they pinch her, or, appropriately, a bunch of girls, whatever. And it really bothers her. So I'm like, your body, your boundaries. So how are you going to tell that to your friends? Right? How are you going to know? How are you going to share that your body is your boundaries, and you have to say that for yourself? Nobody can do that for you. I'm not going to be with you when you're a teenager in college, right? And you're going to have clear boundaries, right? So go back tomorrow. What are you going to say? And I helped her. We wrote a script. We talked about what she was going to say. I really feel uncomfortable when you touch me. Please don't touch my body. Right? Like, but they have to know, they have to be able to do that for themselves. We cannot always do it for them. We have to give them the tools to do that.
Yeah. I know whatever the name of this series is, Two Truths and a Lie. I think you've given us two amazing strategies. I think you've given us the idea of being intentional when we're building our family, which I think is really, really important, because life can get so busy. We can just be doing, but to actually stop and be intentional about what our goals are and how we're going to accomplish those goals, I think it's gold. And I also think that what you've told us about how to teach our children the skills of dealing with insensitive comments is also so golden. So I'm going to ask you the flip side of the question about mental health. What is one sort of myth that you'd like to burst about mental health? And particularly when it comes to our kids or our families or parenting.
Mental health is such a charged subject, and I'm still trying to figure out why there's such a stigma around mental health, and there's not a stigma around cancer or physical ailments, right? Like, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around why that is. It's so much more elusive to people, and it's so much harder for people to accept, right? So I don't have the answer to that, but the myth that I would like to debunk is mental health is when you or your child or someone in your family is struggling with mental health. I guess let me say, we'll figure out what the myth is in a second, but I think what I want to say is that if we can face that challenge as we would face a physical or genetic disorder or a cancer diagnosis or asthma or, something chronic that you need to address, I think we would do such a service to people who are struggling with mental health. Because when you are dealing with something that also comes along with so much stigma, and the problem with mental health is that a lot of times the way people behave and act with mental health struggles is so offensive and so hard to manage. And we think they can control it and it's their fault. And, it's so fraught with so many hard things to manage. And I want to say the myth is that we can't always do something about it, right? Your parenting, it's nothing to do with your parenting. When you're struggling with a child with mental health, I think the biggest thing for me is when you go on Instagram and you go on social media and you read a ton, and there's all these parenting methods, unconditional love and, conscious discipline and, all these parenting things. And you look at yourself and you'll be like, what am I doing wrong? Why do I have a child that's struggling so much? And I'm trying so hard in all my parenting methods, and it's nothing to do. Like, your parenting has nothing to do with why your kid is struggling. Now, of course, it's our job to do the best we can and find the things that can help support our children. And sometimes that's not parenting, right? Sometimes it's letting go of us being the parent to them at that moment, right? Like if you have to send your child away to a treatment center, or you have to, like that's us letting go as parenting and realize that we cannot provide what our child needs, right? So I think it's not all in our control. And it's not always something that we can change or do. And at the same time, one of my favorite parenting quotes is from Brad Reedy. And he says, in any given moment, we are doing our best and we can do better. Right. And that is so powerful to me, because that is how I live my life. And we're almost 99% of the time, our parent is doing their best. And even if their best looks really horrible, it is their best. That's the capacity that they have. And it doesn't mean we sit back and say, I'm not going to work on myself. We can always learn. We can always discover. We can always evolve and do something better. But we can't discount the fact that we're doing our best. We're doing our best and we can do better. So especially children who are struggling with mental health, and you see these parenting, memes or these parenting discussions, like if you would just do this, right? Or if you did this, and you look at, I've done this and I know how this feels, and I know better and I still do it. And I'm like, well, that's not how it works in my family, right? If I don't, there is, and my therapist always tells me, he's like, those things are not for you. Stop looking at them. Your family is never going to fit into that mold. Your family is never going to be conscious discipline and you're successful. Like it's never going to work. And all we do is we make ourselves feel bad. So I think it's all these beautiful parenting discussions and mentors and guides are so important, because we can always learn from them. But also know that if you're struggling with a child with unique needs, or not neurotypical, or with mental health challenges, like just, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's that you have a really, really, really special scenario. And it could be that nothing you're going to do is going to feel right, or is going to get the results that you want. Yeah. And I'm living that right. I can say it because I'm living it right now as we speak.
Which as a parent, I'm sure is an incredibly painful thing, because sometimes we just wish that if I would do X, Y, Z different, then it would change. But to just come to the realization that perhaps
it's the worst thing to look at a situation and be like, there is nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about this right now. And it's heartbreaking, and it's okay to be heartbroken too. It's okay to mourn your dreams and mourn the way you wish it was, right? And look at other families and be like, I wish I had a functional family, and you never know what's going on behind closed doors, also recognizing that. But it's okay. It's okay to grieve the fact that your journey and your child isn't what you expected, B, struggling, C, you can't really do anything about it. Like, I'm not saying that I'm saying the opposite. I'm not saying that we should just be okay with it and not be sad about it and just, it is what it is, right? I'm saying it's painful. It's hard. Just, it's okay. It's to be sad, and it's okay to wish it were different. Right. And then, try to, then that's where the intention comes back in, right? And then it's like, okay, well, what is in my control? What change can I actually affect? When do I have to let go? When do I get support? When do I recognize that I can't help enough, right? And it's probably one of the hardest things to realize, that you can't give your child what they need. Yeah. And because that goes against every mothering instinct that we're created with, right? And to have to be humbled into knowing that you don't have it. You cannot give them what you need. You will never be the answer to their struggle, right? that takes a lot of work and a lot of self-reflection and a lot of, you know, deep, you know, whether you work that through with a therapist or however you do your deep emotional work. I mean, it's going to be a lifetime. It's never going to go away. Right. I think that's another myth is like, I go to therapy and I'm fixed and I can, you know, like to me, therapy is a lifelong ongoing process because we're constantly evolving. We're constantly having to wrestle with different things that come up for us. We're constantly being triggered by different things. Circumstances are constantly changing. So for me, and it's not for everybody, and a lot of therapists also feel like you go to therapy for a certain amount of time. And for me, I've been in therapy consistently for almost 10 years, and I don't plan on changing that. Like, that is how I survive. That is how I make sure I can function, you know, in a life that takes a lot of emotional work, you know? So therapy to me is a lifelong goal. And I think, especially if you're dealing with trauma, like I talk about with my kids all the time, like if you had a traumatic incident, it's not like one day you're going to stop thinking about that incident or it's not going to affect you anymore. It's that it's like a wave, right? Like you will get triggered. But the thing is when you get triggered, how deep do you go, right? Could you use your coping skills? Could you get out of it, right? It's just you learn how to live with the trauma instead of getting, you know, flattened and non-functional, right? So it's not like it's ever going to go away. It's just we learn to live with it in a healthy way. And instead of it being something that overcomes us, it's something that makes us, you know, who we are and shapes us as how we live. Our like trauma will affect you. It will change you, right? But it doesn't have to be you. Really? I don't know. So was there a myth in there somewhere? I think there were a few.
I think if I had to sum it up, and you can tell me if I get it right, I think the myth that the myth that you would debunk is that you can fix whatever mental health challenge is thrown at your child. Is that?
Yeah, I would go a step further. I would say what I'm trying to say is that your parenting is not necessarily, right. You know, a cause and effect, right? Like you can parent beautifully and still have a child that struggles. Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, it's not all in your control, and it's not all about how you parent, because you can have a child that struggles and you can be the most amazing parent with all the tools, and you can be a parent that has no tools and produces a child that is super functional. You know, I think of course parenting is huge, and the more we know, the more, you know, the more tools we have, the better off we are. But I think there's a myth, I guess maybe I'm projecting, but I think when you're in a situation and your child is acting really inappropriately, right? He's either violent or he's disrespectful or he's out of control. I think so many times people look at that and say, wow, like that's dysfunctional, or that what did that parent do to that kid? Or like, where are her boundaries, or where, you know? And I can tell you firsthand that I've been in so many situations where I feel like a fool. I feel embarrassed and ashamed that my child's acting like this. And at the same time, I know that I can't do anything about it. And it's not about me, and it's not about how I parent, and it's not about any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely hear that. And I think that is, it's something very, very important to know, right? That you shouldn't personalize their struggles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to say thank you so much. This has been really, really amazing, so insightful. And
my pleasure.
Yes. Thank you again for coming on, for sharing your story, your insights, your wisdom. And if people want to connect with you further, they can follow you, I believe, on. Do you want to give our listeners?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. My name on Instagram is Chavie Bruk, so it's just my name. And I do have a blog called clearasmud.blog, and that is my little baby, and it's been really fun for me. I've also started offering consultation services for either somebody who's looking to start or explore the adoption process, or for people who are dealing with or struggling with kids who are not neurotypical and who need a different way of parenting and just want someone who's been there, who is there, who's doing it, who's figuring it out, and support in that area. And I think there's so much more of us out there than we even can imagine. Yeah. So that you can find on my blog as well. There's a consultation button if that ever becomes a need for anybody. That is something that I just launched a little while ago.
Wow. I wish you a lot of success with that. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your questions for future episodes. And please take a moment, think about someone else who might benefit from this and forward it on to them. If you enjoyed this podcast, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully, for more insights on how to bring meaning, joy, love into your life based on timeless Jewish wisdom. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out.